Hey guys, welcome back to r/MaliciousCompliance. In this story, my boss thought he was invincible, ignore safety violations, push the product out, and fire anyone who speaks up, including the engineer who designed the whole system, which was me. However, he forgot that I actually owned the technology on paper. Let's dive right into the video. And the title story starts like this. I used to think the phrase safety is everyone's responsibility actually meant something. But then I met my new boss. For context, I'm an engineer in a very unsexy corner of manufacturing. Think of industrial filling lines, big stainless steel machines that pump flammable liquids into metal cans at ridiculous speeds. Lots of pressure, lots of moving parts, and lots of ways to lose fingers or explode the building if you are careless about it. Before everything went sideways, I had what I thought was a pretty sweet setup. I had designed a safety system for these filling lines years ago. It was a mix of hardware and control logic that basically made it very hard for operators to hurt themselves or blow up the plant, even if they did something dumb. Stuff like redundant pressure relief, interlocks on doors, automatic purge cycles, overfill detection, all of that tied into a central controller. Instead of selling the patents outright, I kept ownership and granted an exclusive license to a company that built and sold the machines. In return, I got royalties on every line sold and a consulting contract as the safety system specialist attached to the product line. The deal also said that as long as I was the designated safety consultant and signed off on designs, they kept the exclusive license. It had a whole section about regulatory compliance, safety reporting, and what would happen if they did shady stuff. The old CEO and I were on the same page. If they ever tried to cut corners on safety or punish me for raising issues, I could terminate the license early. It was a boring little clause back then, but it will matter later. For several years it was great, we had a solid safety record, we passed audits, and customers liked that we took risks seriously. I spent my days tweaking designs, training operators, and occasionally flying out to help commission new lines at customer plants. Then the company got bought, the old CEO retired with a golden parachute, and in walked my new boss. He showed up with the title of Division Director, a shiny watch, and the kind of smile that does not reach the eyes. He had come from some cost-cutting turnaround type job in a completely different industry. As far as I could tell, his main skill was making spreadsheets look good to people who had never seen the shop floor. At his first all hands, he talked for 20 minutes about margin pressure and waste. The only time he mentioned safety was as expensive downtime. I had a bad feeling here, but I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. That did not last long though. The first real red flag came during a design review. We were developing a higher capacity version of our main filling line. Bigger pumps, faster throughput, and the same footprint. That kind of scaling is tricky because all the forces and failure modes scale up too. I'd already flagged a few things that needed beefing up, like thicker blast panels, upgraded relief valves, and a stronger enclosure around the metering section. My boss sat in on the review and listened for about 10 minutes. Then he started asking the kind of questions that make every engineer inwardly cringe. Do we really need 2 relief valves? Can't we just have one if it's properly maintained? Why is this housing so thick? Doesn't that add material cost? What's the probability of this blast event again? 1 in what? A million? That's basically 0. I explained as patiently as I could that the safety factors were not optional. We had based them on actual incident reports in the industry and requirements from regulators. I even pointed out that the original patents referenced a minimum level of redundancy. He didn't like that though. After the meeting, he pulled me into his office and he said I was being overly conservative and that we needed to be pragmatic if we wanted to stay competitive. He said customers didn't care about an extra layer of steel they could not see, they just cared about cost and throughput. I told him customers also tended to care about not burning their plant down. He just laughed at that and said, "Look, you're the safety guy, so write it up in a way that checks the boxes but stop gold plating everything. From now on, your job is to support the business and not slow it down." That phrase, support the business, became a theme. Over the next few months, there was a steady drip of small changes that chipped away at the safety margins. A guard that used to be interlocked became just a mechanical latch, a manual purge valve became optional on the cost-reduced model. The standard spec for certain hoses quietly changed to a cheaper supplier, and each time I pushed back in writing, I sent polite but firm emails attached to risk assessments and wrote comments like, "This deviates from the approved safety concept and increases the probability of catastrophic failure in event of blockage." Sometimes my comments got ignored, sometimes they got waved away in meetings with, "We will revisit this later, we just need to hit this deadline." My boss started copying senior management on emails where he called my concerns hypothetical scenarios and not aligned with commercial realities. I had been around long enough to know how to protect myself, so I documented everything. Every design change, every objection, every time I was overruled, and meanwhile, I was still the one signing off the final safety checklists. I would annotate them like crazy, signed under protest, see attached memo, and it drove my boss nuts. One day, he called me into his office again, closed the door, and dropped the corporate voice. "I need you to stop writing under protest on everything," he said. "You're making us look bad with our own customers. If you cannot commit to the company line, I will find someone else who can." I told him I was not gonna put my name on something I knew was compromised without documenting it. I also casually mentioned that per our license agreement, certain base safety features could not be removed without my approval. He waved his hand dismissively though. "Nobody reads those old contracts," he said. "Legal will tweak whatever we need. You're overcomplicating things." And that was the moment I realized he had never actually read my original licensing agreement. I didn't argue though, I just went back to my office and reread it myself, slowly line by line, like it was the first time. The clause about safety violations and retaliation was still right there in plain text. The incident that blew everything up, almost literally, started on a rainy Tuesday. We had a major order from a big customer and they wanted a rush delivery of 2 high-capacity lines for a new plant. Tight schedule, big money, and lots of pressure. During factory testing of the first line, one of the technicians came to me looking pale. He said the machine had kicked during a blocked nozzle event. There had been some kind of a loud bang inside the enclosure, the pressure spiked, and a small section of one panel had visibly bulged. No injuries, no leaks, but it wasn't something you just shrug off. I went to the test bay and took a look. The bulge was right where I had originally spec'd an extra reinforcement plate that had been removed in one of the cost optimization rounds. I checked the data from the sensors and the pressure had spiked much higher and faster than our models predicted. The only reason we hadn't had a full-blown rupture was a combination of dumb luck and the fact that the operator hit the emergency stop instantly. I wrote up a detailed incident report and I recommended we halt testing on that design, reinforced the enclosure, and run another round of simulations before proceeding further. I also recommended we notify the customer of a slight delay and be transparent about the issue. I sent the report to my boss, the plant manager, and the quality control manager. Within an hour, I got called into a war room meeting. My boss was there, along with a couple of people from sales, the plant manager, and someone from HR for some reason. And the mood was tense. My amazing boss was starting by accusing me of writing alarmist nonsense in my incident report, and he said using the phrase near miss was irresponsible. He said I was creating liability where none existed, and he wanted me to rewrite the report to say it was a routine test anomaly and not a safety incident. He also wanted me to tone down the suggestion of halting testing and instead say that we had temporarily paused calibration. But I said no. I said if they wanted to add their own spin on things, they were free to add a management comment, but I was not gonna falsify a safety report. That is when the HR person stepped in. They used that quiet, soft tone HR people use when they are about to screw you over and said, "We all need to be rowing in the same direction here." Refusing a reasonable request from leadership can be seen as not being a team player. I replied that misrepresenting a safety incident to a customer and potentially to regulators was not reasonable, and it went downhill from there. The meeting ended with my boss leaning over the table and saying, "If you take this outside the company, you will regret it." I went home that night and thought about it for a long time, but then I filed a complaint with the National Safety Authority. I did not do it impulsively. I attached the test data, my original report, and a summary of the design changes that had chipped away at our safety margins, and I also attached a copy of my job description and my role in the licensing agreement so it was clear why I was involved, and I used my real name because whistleblower protections exist for a reason. Investigators are slow until they aren't. For a while, nothing much happened outwardly. Life went on, we kept building machines, and my boss got snippier. I suddenly stopped getting invited to certain meetings, accidentally left off calendars, that sort of thing. I was moved out of my private office into a shared workspace closer to the test bay, which I actually preferred, but HR framed it as a change in responsibilities. My annual review, which has always been solid, suddenly included phrases like "not aligned with leadership vision" and "needs to work on communication style." My raise that year was basically a rounding error. Every conversation with my boss had this undercurrent of hostility, and one day he said, "You know, if you spent half as much effort helping us instead of playing safety cop, we would all be better off." I just smiled and went back to making sure nobody got killed. But then the inspectors showed up. They arrived unannounced one morning, hard hats under their arms, ID badges on lanyards. You could feel the air change on the production floor. Someone from the front desk must have called ahead, because by the time they reached the engineering office, my boss was waiting, wearing his fake polite smile. They asked to see the incident report from the test bay, and they asked to interview me as the design authority for the safety system. They asked to see change logs, risk assessments, and internal communications about the modifications. My boss tried to manage the conversation. He kept jumping in to answer questions for me, downplaying things and redirecting. One of the inspectors eventually turned to him and said, "We need to speak to the engineer of record without interference, please. You will get your turn." The look on his face was priceless. When it was just me and the inspectors, I told them the truth. No embellishments here, no dramatics, just a linear recounting of the design changes, the incident, and the pressure I'd been under to water down my reports. And by the way, guys, just to quickly interject here, if you would have been in OP's position and you would have spotted all these safety issues, would you have also become a whistleblower, even though it might cost you your job and it might shut down the company? Let me know what you would have done in the comments, but I would say OP is really brave. Also, don't forget to like the video, because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much. Either way, I also mentioned in passing that my role in the license agreement required me to sign off on safety critical changes and that I'd been overruled on several points. They took a lot of notes, and a few days after the inspectors left, my boss called me into his office again. This time HR was already sitting there with a folder. He did not bother with small talk this time. "So," he said, "it seems you decided to involve regulators instead of working with your team internally." I reminded him of the meeting where he'd suggested I would regret it if I took it outside, and he said something about context and misunderstandings, and then launched into a speech about how my negative attitude was impacting morale and how my refusal to align with leadership was creating a so-called adversarial environment. HR chimed in with, "We've tried coaching, but there hasn't been sufficient improvement." I asked if this was leading somewhere specific. Well, that is when he dropped it. "We are done here," he said. "Effective immediately, your employment with the company is terminated. Your consulting agreement is cancelled too. You are to cease all work related to our filling systems, including any contact with customers or regulators, and hand over all documentation to us. You are not authorized to speak on behalf of this company in any context going forward." As he spoke, he slid a termination letter across the desk. It had all the usual corporate legalese, plus a line about failure to follow management direction and creating unnecessary regulatory exposure. I read it carefully. One phrase jumped out at me that said, "Your role as designated safety consultant under existing agreement is hereby ended." I asked calmly, "Just to be clear, you are ending my employment and the consulting role described in the licensing agreement, yeah?" "Yes," he said, a little too fast. "We'll be taking full ownership of the product line internally. We don't need your involvement anymore." I nodded, folded the letter, and put it in my bag. "Understood," I said. "I will comply fully." He smirked like he had won something, but that was his mistake. So that night, I opened up the original licensing agreement at my kitchen table and read it line by line again, and there it was. A clause that had been added at the insistence of the old CEO and me back when everyone still cared about doing things right. It basically said, "The exclusive license for the safety system patents was contingent on the company engaging me or a designated successor approved by me as the lead safety consultant for the product line. However, if the company fired me or removed me from that role in retaliation for safety-related complaints, refusal to sign off on non-compliant designs, or participation in regulatory investigations, I had the right to terminate the license with immediate effect. In the event of termination for cause under that clause, all rights reverted to me, and any continued manufacture, sale, or use of products implementing the patented safety system would be unauthorized and subject to infringement." We had phrased it broadly, on purpose. The old CEO had seen enough horror stories to know what could happen if business realities started trumping safety. I had the termination letter, I had the email chain about the incident report, and I had notes from the meeting where he had basically threatened me over going to regulators. I had the fact that I was fired a few days after inspectors came. If that was not retaliation, I didn't know what was. I called a lawyer who specialized in IP and contracts. I had worked with them years before when we drafted the original licensing deal. They read the documents, asked some questions, and finally said, "I cannot promise this will be painless, but you have a very strong case to terminate." They've handed you their own throat in writing. We drafted a formal notice of termination. It cited the clause, referenced the termination letter, and explained that their actions constituted retaliation for my safety complaints and participation in a regulatory investigation. And it stated that effective immediately, the exclusive license from me was revoked and all rights reverted to me. We sent it via every method available, registered mail, courier, email to legal, the board, and my ex-boss. On top of that, my lawyer suggested we inform the safety authority that I was no longer the designated safety consultant and that the company no longer had a valid license to the patented safety system referenced in their regulatory filings. We did that too. I didn't storm the building, I didn't shout or send a dramatic email, I just complied with my ex-boss's order of to cease all work and ended my so-called involvement exactly as the contract allowed. He wanted me gone and uninvolved. Okay, I comply. So I was gone, and so were their patents. Malicious compliance at its quietest. The reaction was not quiet though. Within a couple of days I started getting frantic calls and emails from people still at the company. Apparently my ex-boss had received the termination notice and either hadn't told anyone or had told them that it was just a scare tactic. Then the safety authority replied to my notice and copied them. In their response, they confirmed receipt of my statement and requested clarification from the company about how they intended to maintain compliance without the licensed safety system and without a designated safety consultant. That email went not just to my ex-boss, but to the company's regulatory contact, the plant manager, and someone on the executive team. Now more people knew, and a week later my lawyer forwarded me a letter from the company's legal department. It was full of bluster about improper termination, bad faith, and that we dispute your characterization of events. They said the firing had nothing to do with my safety complaints and everything to do with performance issues. They claimed the clause did not apply. My lawyer responded with the following: my performance reviews before the new boss, the timeline of my incident report, the regulator visit, the termination letter with that convenient phrasing, and a short memo summarizing whistleblower protections. He ended the letter by saying essentially, we are prepared to defend our position in arbitration of court. In the meantime, any continued manufacture or sale of products using the patented safety system will be treated as willful infringement. While this was going back and forth, the safety authorities started sniffing around more aggressively. They requested updated design documentation, they requested test records, and they requested a list of customers who had purchased the new higher capacity lines. Customers started hearing gossip. One of my former clients called me directly and said, "We got a letter from regulators asking questions about the safety system and your involvement. Are we in trouble?" I couldn't give them legal advice, but I told them I was no longer employed or consulting for the company and that I terminated the license for the safety system. I told them to talk to their own lawyers, and they did. Soon after, a couple of major customers put their orders on hold pending clarification. One of them demanded contractual assurances from the company that the patents were validly licensed and that regulators were satisfied. The company, of course, could not give those assurances, not truthfully anyway. Their lawyers tried one last gambit. They offered to reinstate my consulting contract if I would rescind the termination notice and sent a letter to regulators saying that I was satisfied with their safety practices. I would like to say that it took days to consider it, weighed all my options, and agonized over the ethics. In reality, I laughed out loud the moment I read it. My reply via my lawyer was one sentence: no. We also included a polite note reminding them that this kind of offer in the context of an ongoing regulatory investigation did not look great. After that, things escalated quickly on their side and very slowly on mine. On their side, emergency board meetings, panic calls, threats, attempts to redesign the system without infringing the patents. On mine, coffee with my lawyer, long walks, and the occasional phone call from former coworkers updating me on the chaos. They tried to argue that they could just turn off certain features of the safety system and keep shipping machines. The problem is, the patents covered the whole architecture, how the sensors work together, the logic of the interlocks, and even certain calibration routines. To design around it, they would have to go backwards in safety or spend a lot of time and money on a new system, then get it certified. Time they didn't have and money they didn't really want to spend, the safety authority, sensing blood in the water, issued a formal notice that they were reviewing the certification of the new high-capacity line. They didn't recall existing installations yet, but they strongly recommended that customers exercise caution with purchasing additional units until the matter was resolved. Translation: nobody was gonna sign $1 million purchase order under their clout. Orders dried up, and here's where the second half of my malicious compliance came in. Remember that exclusive part of the license? Once I terminated it, the exclusivity vanished. I could license the patents to anyone I wanted. Or sell them outright. News travels fast in niche industries, and within a short time, a competitor reached out to me. They had heard rumors that my old company was having difficulties and that I might be available. We met in a nondescript office and I laid out the situation in broad strokes. They already knew a surprising amount. I mean, word gets around. They were very interested in these patents, and their own safety system was, frankly, behind mine. They had lost a few bids over the years because customers preferred my old company's more advanced safety architecture, and they would be more than happy to turn the tables. The negotiations took a while. Lawyers did what lawyers do. We went through scenarios, trade sale, licensing, joint venture, and in the end we settled on a structure that gave them an exclusive license with an option to buy the patents later, plus me on a very comfortable employment/consulting contract. The upfront payment alone was more than I had made in the last several years combined. The royalty terms were generous. As part of the deal, my new partner's lawyers sent a formal notice to my old company and their biggest customers, and it basically said they now held an exclusive license to the patents. My old company's license had been terminated for cause. Any continued manufacture or sale of infringing products would result in legal action. They also very politely offered existing customers an upgrade path if they wanted to switch to machines from my new partner that used the fully licensed safety system. From what I heard, a couple of my old company's biggest customers took that offer almost immediately. At around the same time, the safety authority concluded their review. They did not go nuclear, but they issue a strongly worded finding that my old company had in fact misrepresented at least one incident and had implemented design changes that weakened the safety case without proper justification. They ended up fining the company, and they required additional testing and documentation. They put some limitations on new installations until things were cleaned up. None of this on its own would have killed a healthy company. But combine regulatory trouble, patent problems, frozen orders, and nervous customers, and you've got a recipe for disaster. Within a few months, my old company announced restructuring. They shuttered the filling systems division entirely. A little while later, they filed for bankruptcy. It was not some dramatic movie scene where the building literally burned down and my ex-boss was hauled off in handcuffs, although that would be nice, the handcuff part. It was quieter than that. Paychecks stopped, people got let go, and assets got sold off. Lawyers filed paperwork, and my ex-boss did not go to jail or anything, but he did get exactly what he had been so casually promising me. Career consequences. The industry is small. Everyone knew he had presided over a safety scandal. My former coworkers landed on their feet mostly. Some of them even ended up at my new company. They were understandably wary around me at first, but once they realized I hadn't been out to hurt them, just keep them from blowing themselves up, things were fine. From my side, life got better. I moved into a role at a new company where I had more control over the safety culture from the outset. The management actually listened when I said certain shortcuts were not acceptable, and they had seen what happened to someone who ignored that. I still spent a lot of time around greasy machinery and loud test bays, but now it was on my terms. I sleep better at night knowing I was not fighting a constant rearguard action against cost-cutting insanity. Financially, I was more than okay. The patent deal plus the new contract meant I could stash a comfortable cushion away and not worry about whether a single boss's bad mood could wreck my life. And don't turn off the video just yet, the next one is a super interesting revenge story that is titled "Mother-in-law lied about my baby gender and now have to see my baby in the clothes they brought." So November last year, I, 30 female, gave birth to our first baby. It is the first in my family and the sixth in my husband's family, 32 male. It's important to say that all 6 kids so far are boys and mother-in-law is in some sick baby girl rabies. Ever since we made the announcement, mother-in-law convinced herself that I was pregnant with a girl. I told her that once we knew the gender, she would be the first one to know. We told her it was a boy, and she still was convinced it was a girl. She told the whole side of the family it was a girl. I corrected, but she told them I was just annoyed because I wanted a boy first. I wanted a healthy baby, I didn't really care about the gender, and she also told them that we are naming the girl after her mom, which we will never do because hubby hates his grandma. When the baby shower gifts started to come, I noticed a lot of things that wasn't in the register, embroidered things with grandma's name. And it didn't matter, we told them the gender and the name and made clear we are not lying about the gender. Everyone believed her. Well, then the baby was born, and imagine the surprise. It was a boy, just like we've been telling everyone. The problem for them though was that now the baby had plenty of girly clothes, pink onesies, etc., and we are dressing our baby with them, specifically for his family video calls and for pictures for them. After Saturday, mother-in-law called us to scream to us because we are making the elders uncomfortable for not sticking to a masculine color scheme for the baby clothes, and we have to stop being this childish. She just thought my belly shape was more like girl than for a boy, and we told her we will not change the baby clothes and to just wait until the dresses fit. He will look adorable. And the next one is a malicious compliance story, which is titled "A bar near me found a hilarious loophole to get around noise complaints and keep hosting live music." So a bar in my town used to host live bands all the time until one of the neighbors complained about the noise. It turns out the zoning rules did not allow them to have live music and they almost got shut down. The bar owner read over said zoning rules and notices that the wording forbade them to have live music indoors, but they could have it outdoors. So they moved the stage to the patio section, where it would have been even louder for the neighbors and still be legal though. They still have live music sometimes now, but not nearly as often as they used to. Don't want to push their luck, I guess. And yeah guys, thank you for watching, please don't forget to subscribe and I will see you again tomorrow.